One woman who had been trapped in a painful, soul-crushing relationship once said, "I used to keep telling him he acts like I'm not his person, and then one day I realized he's not mine either." That moment changed everything, not because she left, but because for the first time she saw clearly. She stopped begging to be chosen and started choosing herself. Too many women stay, not because it's love, but because they've mistaken anxiety for passion, silence for peace, and control for care. This video isn't for women who hate their relationship. It's for the ones who silently question it, the ones who look fine on the outside, but feel emotionally starved in private, the ones who don't scream or fight, but slowly forget who they were before him, who keep asking themselves, is this really what love is supposed to feel like? You don't need another list of red flags. You need a mirror. Because sometimes the most dangerous relationships are the ones that almost work. So here are 5 brutally honest signs that it's not love anymore. It's just fear, comfort, or a story that's already over. 1. You're always the one apologizing. Even when you're not wrong, there's a subtle violence in relationships where one person becomes the default peacekeeper, not because they're mature, not because they're calm, but because the other person has made it emotionally unsafe not to be. You start apologizing for your tone, even when you only asked a simple question. You say, sorry for being tired, for being busy, for being quiet, for being human. You become fluent in self-blame, and what's worse, you start believing it's your fault. Here's the problem. When you're the only one ever taking responsibility, the relationship stops being a partnership. It becomes emotional slavery. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou. But most people don't. Instead, they reinterpret cruelty as stress. They reframe selfishness as, he just needs space, and they apologize over and over again just to avoid a cold shoulder, a silent treatment, or yet another fight they didn't ask for. Imagine this. A woman confronts her boyfriend after he disappears for 3 days. No calls, no texts, nothing. When he finally shows up, he's angry. Why are you always so dramatic? I needed space. You're suffocating me. She ends up apologizing, not for disappearing, but for being too emotional, for not trusting him, for making things worse. What just happened? Gaslighting. And worse, internalized gaslighting. Because now she polices her own reactions before he even gets a chance to. Let's go deeper. What's really being lost in this pattern? Not just peace, not just fairness, it's your dignity. Because the more you take the blame for things you didn't cause, the more you train yourself to abandon your own perception of reality. You teach yourself that his comfort matters more than your truth. The worst loneliness is not to be comfortable with yourself. Mark Twain. And yet, that's where many women end up, in relationships where they can't even tell if their feelings are real anymore, where they're constantly editing themselves just to keep things normal. But ask yourself this, what kind of love needs you to constantly betray your own gut just to keep it alive? Because real love doesn't require you to erase yourself. Only toxic love makes you feel like your emotions are a burden. Only toxic love punishes you for needing reassurance. Only toxic love makes you the villain when all you asked for was connection. So if you're constantly walking on eggshells, if you say sorry more than you say, I feel, if you've started doubting your own memory, your own instincts, your own worth, it's not love, it's manipulation, dressed up as you're too sensitive. And no, you're not too sensitive. You're just finally waking up. 2, you feel more alone with him than without him, One of the most dangerous signs in a relationship isn't screaming. It's silence, not peaceful silence, but hollow, heavy, soul-depleting silence. The kind where you sit next to each other on the couch, but it feels like you're a million miles away. You speak, but nothing lands. You cry, and he barely looks up. Hell is other people. Jean-Paul Sartre. But worse than hell is being emotionally abandoned by someone who swore they loved you. This is the loneliness no one talks about. Because how do you explain it? You're in a relationship. You live together. You share a bed. But deep inside, you feel invisible. Here's what that kind of loneliness looks like. You have a hard day at work. You want to talk about it. But you hesitate because you know he'll either minimize it, change the subject, or make it about himself. So you swallow it. Again. Later that night, you try to connect. Maybe just a hug. He scrolls through his phone. You go to bed next to a warm body with a cold soul, and that's when it hits you. You feel more alone with him than you ever did without him. This isn't what love is supposed to feel like. You weren't meant to beg for crumbs of attention. You weren't meant to be emotionally malnourished while playing the role of the supportive partner. We are never so lonely as when we are with the wrong person. Alice Walker. In real love, your presence matters. Your voice matters. Your sadness isn't an inconvenience. It's an invitation to hold space. But in toxic love, the more you need, the more you're punished. The more you open up, the more you're ignored. And over time, you stop reaching out altogether. You shut down, not because you want to, but because you're tired of being shut out. Ask yourself honestly, do I feel seen when I speak? Do I feel safe showing emotion? Do I feel emotionally full or drained after spending time with him? Because here's the hard truth. If being in the relationship feels lonelier than being alone, you're not in love. You're in emotional exile. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't to leave the relationship. It's to admit that it's already over. 3. You're constantly trying to fix him, but he's not even trying. There's a quiet tragedy in the way many women love. They don't fall for who a man is. They fall for who he could become. And then they spend years trying to drag him there. You see his potential. You see the broken boy inside the distant man. And you tell yourself, if I just love him hard enough, he'll change. But here's the truth you've been avoiding. Healing someone who doesn't want to be healed isn't love. It's self-abandonment. You cannot save people. You can only love them. Anais Nin. And even then, love doesn't mean staying when staying is destroying you. Let's make this real. You notice he drinks too much. He says he's stressed, says he'll cut back. You research therapists, send him articles, offer to help, but he keeps drinking. You notice his temper. He yells, breaks things, then apologizes. You learn about trauma, suggest anger management, try to understand him better. But he keeps erupting. You do the work. He makes promises. But nothing actually changes. What you're in isn't a relationship. It's emotional labor disguised as commitment. You're mothering him, therapizing him, sacrificing yourself on the altar of his potential. Let's be brutally honest. If you're doing all the emotional heavy lifting, if you're always the one suggesting solutions, regulating the conflict, managing his moods, then this isn't love, it's a rescue mission, and you're drowning in it. Loving a man shouldn't feel like dragging a corpse up a hill. The irony? The longer you try to save him, the more you lose yourself. You stop laughing like you used to. You stop dreaming. Your world shrinks to his damage, his struggle, his pace. And here's what hurts most. Deep down, you know he's not going to change. Not because he's incapable, but because he doesn't want to. He's comfortable with who he is. You're the one uncomfortable because you're still hoping for the man he could be. But people don't change because you love them. They change when they're willing to lose you if they don't. If he hasn't stepped up by now, he probably never will. And you staying isn't helping him grow. It's teaching him that he can stay broken and still be loved unconditionally. That's not love, that's self-destruction. So ask yourself, if you stopped trying to fix him, what would be left? And if the answer is not much, then maybe the relationship you're fighting for doesn't really exist. 4. You're afraid to speak your truth because you know it will start a fight. Let's talk about the silence that doesn't come from peace, but from fear. It's when you rehearse every word in your head before speaking, not because you're unsure, but because you're afraid of his reaction. You weigh every sentence. Will this make him shut down? Will he twist it against me? Will I regret even bringing it up? This is not communication. This is walking through a minefield where the price of honesty is emotional punishment. Where we cannot speak, we are enslaved. Friedrich Nietzsche. In healthy love, your truth might cause tension, but it's still welcome. In toxic love, your truth becomes a threat. Here's what it looks like. You bring up something small. Maybe he forgot your plans again, or interrupted you in front of others. You say it gently, carefully. He responds with, "Here we go again." Or he sighs and leaves the room. Or worse, he flips it. "You're always criticizing me. You're never happy." And now you're the problem. Again. So next time, you don't bring it up. You swallow it. And that becomes your new pattern. Silence to avoid chaos. But here's the ugly truth. If being honest costs you emotional safety, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance. And every time you hold back your truth just to keep the peace, you chip away at your identity. Peace bought by silence is not peace, it is denial. This isn't just about communication, it's about control. Because if someone can make you afraid to express a feeling, they control not only your behavior, but your inner world. That's emotional submission. That's how the strongest women slowly vanish in relationships that look normal from the outside. Ask yourself, do I feel safe bringing up hard topics? Do I fear being blamed or punished when I express myself? Have I started avoiding my own emotions just to keep him calm? Because here's the truth no one tells you. Love isn't real if you can't show up fully. Not just the easy parts, but the fear, the sadness, the anger, the vulnerability. If your truth has to be filtered, softened, or silenced, then the connection you think you have might just be a fear-based agreement. I'll stay quiet if you don't explode. That's not partnership. That's emotional captivity. And you weren't born to live afraid of your own voice. 5. You stay. Because of memories, not because of the present. One of the most seductive traps in a toxic relationship is the past. Not the reality of it, but the memory. The filtered, romanticized version of how good it used to be. You hold on to the early days, the sparks, the promises, the deep conversations at 2 a.m., the way he used to look at you like you were the center of his universe. And now he barely looks up from his phone. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca. But in toxic love, it's the imagination that keeps you locked in. You're not in love with the man who's in front of you today. You're in love with the ghost of who he used to be. Or worse, the fantasy of who you hoped he would become. Let's break it down. You know things haven't been right for a while. You feel the distance, the tension, the coldness. But every time you think of leaving, you remember that one trip, that one night. That one time when everything felt perfect, and you think, maybe it can be like that again. But it won't, because if it was going to be, it already would be. You're not in a relationship. You're in a loop of nostalgia and false hope. Here's the brutal truth. When someone shows you who they are today, believe them, not who they were, not who they said they'd be, not who you wish they could become. You're not giving it another chance. You're just postponing your own healing. Don't cling to a mistake just because you spent a long time making it. Aubrey de Grey. We stay because we've invested time, because we've imagined futures, because we don't want to admit we were wrong about someone we gave our heart to. But time spent in the wrong relationship doesn't earn you love. It just deepens the wound. Ask yourself, are you still deeply in the relationship or just attached to the idea of it? Do you miss him, or do you miss how you used to feel? Are you holding on to love or just afraid to start over? Because love that only lives in the past isn't love anymore. It's memory, and memory won't hold you at night. It won't grow with you. It won't protect your heart. And if the present moment feels more painful than peaceful, then maybe the relationship didn't end when you broke up. Maybe it ended long ago, and you've just been surviving inside the ruins. You don't owe anyone your suffering, not even the version of him that once made you smile. You owe yourself freedom. This is SheNeedsToHearThis, a channel with 100 brutally honest topics every modern woman needs to hear. Share this video with a friend who needs the truth more than comfort.